the 2021 Panty Party hosted by the Success Collective. As you can see, we have been able to collect an incredible amount of product from 2 different entities. We have our Battle of the Boxes business competition, and we also have our Panty Party host competition. And we just thank every single one of you who have donated, contributed in any way by either hosting a party or hosting a collection site. Every year in Colorado Springs, hundreds of women experience homelessness, and they go without access to new underwear and feminine hygiene products. And that is a void that we can fill. Just here to tell you a little more about where this came from and how this Panty Party event got started is Brittany Hansen, the Chief Operating Officer of the Success Collective.
Hi, I'm Brittany Hansen, the COO of the Success Collective. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I wanted to kind of give you the background of where this project and the Panty Party came from. About 5 years ago, I was having a conversation with one of the directors of the Springs Rescue Mission, a local shelter here in Colorado, and he was kind of telling me some of the items that they don't get donated very often that they really need, and one of those items was feminine hygiene products, as well as other hygiene products, underwear, soap, shampoo, conditioner, all those things that people just don't think about. And so that kind of struck a chord with me. And then he went on to tell me kind of the demographic of how women end up in shelters generally. Over 80% are escaping domestic violence. So they leave in the middle of the night to save their lives with literally nothing. A lot have children with them. And imagine just leaving in the night with no money, no belongings, anything, and find themselves at a shelter. So that hit me hard in the heart. That I really wanted to take care of these women. Also, teenage girls that run away from home are usually escaping an abusive environment. So that one also hits me right here. So I kind of just started thinking about, you have these women who didn't choose to be homeless. It's kind of where their life has led them. They don't have products, which are very expensive for women. And then I heard a podcast like a month later that was going on about how one of the hardest parts, they were interviewing a homeless woman, was that she had to choose between food and hygiene products when it was her time of the month, which both are necessities that I can't imagine having to choose one or the other. So I started carrying around tampons in my car. So anytime I saw a homeless woman, I would pull over and give them. And they were always very appreciative of it. So I was like, something's here. Couple months after that, this was all within a year time period, I was at one of my Kiwanis meetings and a Luther pastor was there, and she was talking about on Saturdays they have where people can come get clothing and food for the homeless community, and the women kept asking for belts. And she said, it's so weird. So I finally asked them, why are you asking for belts? And they said so that they could tie themselves up in the tree at night so that they wouldn't be sexually assaulted. That was an emotional moment. I still get emotional talking about it for me. That I then thought about, imagine being subjected to that kind of violence and then having your time of the month and not even having anything to take care of it or clean underwear to change into. So from there is where this all came together in one of this is a need and these women need us. And whatever I can do to give them just a tiny ounce of dignity in their situation, I'm going to do it. And I'm so glad that all of you have joined us on this mission. I couldn't have gotten this event to where it is without the women of the Success Collective who have all come in and joined full-fledged in this, and then the rest of the Colorado Springs community. I am so proud and grateful for you all jumping in, all the businesses that have collected donations, for everyone that's donated. It's incredible, and these are meaningful things to give these women. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me on my cause and making it such a big thing, and we're just getting started. So I just want to tell you, it's only going to get bigger from here. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Good morning, Success Collective. This is Sergeant Jason Garrett. I'm with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. Your friend of mine, Jessica Daniels, asked me to produce a short video just to talk about some of the challenges homeless women in particular face in our community. And just to touch real briefly on maybe some reasons why women find themselves homeless. One of the number one reasons is they're fleeing domestic violence situations, and unfortunately in our society many times, because the men hold the cards and finances and things like that in families, they find themselves with no resources, and it's a kind of a tragic situation for mothers and many times their children. So that's just a common thing that they face, that we see, and obviously also mental illness that's pervasive amongst all demographics with the homeless population here locally. I'd like to introduce you to Deputy Michelle Reed. She is one of the folks that serves our community with the Sheriff's Office and homeless outreach and enforcement. And so I just wanted to bring her into the fold here to talk about some of the specific needs that she sees homeless women needing and facing in our community. So Michelle?
So as Sergeant Garrett mentioned, I do work with the homeless population very frequently, and a lot of times I do see women. As he mentioned before, we have to deal with mental health issues, also drug abuse and or substance abuse, in addition to the economic status and also the domestic violence piece that typically follows that. What I see when I approach a lot of women who are homeless, obviously if they're living out in the elements, they don't have access to showers, clean clothing, or either just proper hygiene products such as toothpaste, underwear, and obviously feminine hygiene products. I know that these women, when they are out on the street, just like any other person, they're out there, they're trying to survive, so they do whatever is necessary to make that happen. So I've known women to also improvise with different necessities that they would need, things that we have that we might take for granted, they don't have access to, so they will do whatever's necessary to produce makeshift products such as toothpaste, mouthwash, hygiene products, clothing. I typically see people in the same clothing like weeks on end, and I know that they're not getting, again, as I mentioned, just proper daily hygiene care with showers and running water and other, necessities such as that.
Yeah, so just thanks, Michelle, for that. So just to kind of wrap things up, from a local law enforcement perspective, I am very appreciative and thankful of the Success Collective for doing this campaign every year, and I wish you the best in raising as much support and tangible products for our homeless women in the community as you possibly can. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura Parker, and I'm the co-founder of a counter-trafficking organization right here in the Springs called the Exodus Road. And I wanted to pop in really quickly and just share with you all the real connection between homelessness and human trafficking. Human trafficking occurs anytime someone is forced to do something for someone else's gain, and there's a measure of fraud, force, or coercion. Or in the commercial sex industry, anytime someone is forced to do a commercial sex act and they're under the age of 18, that's technically human trafficking. And, traffickers prey on the vulnerable, and they use that weakness to exploit them and to get them into manipulative and exploitive situations. And there's no greater vulnerability than homelessness. I was actually reading recently a report from Polaris, which operates one of the largest hotlines in the US for human trafficking, and they did a survivor study and found that 64% of the survivors that they interviewed actually experienced homelessness or an unstable housing situation, living conditions, while they were being recruited into their trafficking situations. And the majority of those were from the LGBTQ community. They were at an increased risk, as well as younger people, even teens or young adults that had just gotten out of the child welfare system or had even run away from the foster care system. And so there was even a report that there were oftentimes traffickers would use homeless shelters as means for recruitment because they knew that they could leverage women's desire for a safe place to sleep, and they could leverage that to exploit them. And so whenever you are serving the homeless community in your town, right here in Colorado, you're actually fighting human trafficking in a really real and practical way. And so, when you look to the margins of your society, when you look to those that don't have access to what they need to feel safe, and when you can step into that gap and fill that practical need, then it's a really practical way that you're making a more just, a more just world, and ultimately a freer world. So thank you so much for serving the homeless women in Colorado Springs. It really matters.
Hi, my name is Amber, and this is my story. I was born in Texas to a single mom. I had lots of family, grandpa, grandma, aunts. We traveled to Mexico a lot to visit our family there. From what I can remember from my early childhood, it's pretty happy. I felt loved, there was lots of people around. Then things started changing. I realized around 5 or 6 or so that we were running from my dad. He was abusive to my mom, and she had left him, and we would move constantly every 3-6 months, sometimes live with friends, her friends, find a place of our own, and he always found us. So about the time I was 7, we moved to Seattle. Just me and my mom, road trip all the way from Texas to Seattle. And we lived there for a while, maybe 6 months or so. I know that my mom was struggling, so we decided to move back to Texas. Things with my mom started to get strange. I remember feeling that I never knew who I was gonna get when I got home, and I just thought that was normal. I didn't know that, people stayed the same person on a regular basis. She would get angry. I could say things one way and 5 minutes later say it the exact same way and get a different response. And she would get angry. She would get blackout angry. She was verbally abusive, sometimes physically abusive. After each episode, she would always come in my room crying, apologizing, but saying she didn't remember what happened. And I was just always so confused. She would call it her monster would come out. And I just remember feeling very strange about it. But at the same time, when my mom was good, she was amazing. She is so smart. She is so giving, one of the best people I'd ever met. And I just thought she hung the moon. And then these things started happening more frequently, and I began to be a little bit more recluse. She would send me with my grandparents a lot, so I stayed there quite a bit. Had a great relationship with my grandpa, my grandma, so. Then at 13, I was at the movies with my grandpa, and I was raped by an ex-employee. I didn't tell anyone until a few weeks later, and had to go to the hospital and do all of those kinds of things. Eventually, we moved to Austin, and we would travel back and forth for my court case, because I had to testify and things like that. And I was probably 14, 15 at the time. And during that time, my grandpa had a heart attack. And so we would spend all night in the hospital with him. And then we would drive to go to mediation or to go testify in court, to, get my assault case handled. Then shortly, like around 17, almost 18, my mom really started to lose her grip and become very verbally abusive. She kicked me out at 17. I went back to Fort Worth to live with my grandparents for a little bit. I worked 2 jobs, got my GED because she withdrew me from high school without my consent. Started taking college classes and working. My mom remarried a few years later, probably about a year and a half later, wanting me to come back to her family. So I moved back to Austin. I stayed with them for about 6 months. I was already 18 and it just wasn't a fit. So I moved out, met a roommate, worked 2 jobs, went to college. I ended up applying for college in Columbia College Chicago to study American Sign Language translating, and I got in. So I moved to Chicago, and kind of after I left my mom's, we stopped talking. I had pretty much no contact with her. Moved back to Chicago. She was living there. So I stayed with her for a little while. Things, were not good with her. And so I moved out, working, getting my own place. I met the kid's dad and got pregnant. He became jealous and abusive and a little bit, I was pregnant and he was pulling on my arm one day, like pulling me out of the apartment. And I was like, I can't do that. So I left and I flew back to Texas and lived with some friends. And he came back for the birth. After the kids were born, 2 weeks after they were born, I almost had a heart attack, postpartum preeclampsia. So I had to go back to the hospital. He was around for about 2 months, before we had a pretty big blowout. The police had to come. And so, I told him he had to leave. I went to Fort Worth to live with some family, and he came back for their second birthday. And he's like, please give us another chance. I said, fine. So I went back there, and it was just a, physically, financially, verbally abusive situation. I realized that he was losing his grip on reality and that it was dangerous for us. So one Friday, I just grabbed the kids, grabbed 3 trash bags and left. As I'm kicking the trash bags down the stairs, they burst and clothes are flying everywhere. The kids are barely 2, they're barely walking. And I just know, if he catches me, it's done deal. We finally get to the bottom of the stairs, throw the kids in the car, and I take off. I make it to Arkansas. My half-sister lives in Arkansas. I make it there and my car dies. My sister was going through her own domestic violence situation, and it was very triggering for me, and her and I ended up not being able to live with one another, and I went to the shelter for women and children escaping domestic violence. It was scary. It was many things, but without them seeing me helping myself, and without them offering a hand out, not a handout, but a hand up, offering their hand out so that I could step up myself and keep climbing, I wouldn't be where I am today. I got a job through a temp agency, and I still didn't have a car. So the temp agency sort of lied for me. They bought me a little bit of time. There was a wrecker shop that tried to fix my car. The shelter tried to pay them. My car didn't end up being fixed. It was dead. And he said, Amber, I know what it's like to be a kid in that situation. My mom picked up me and my brother, and we left, and I watched her go through this. He's like, I'm gonna help you any way I can. He ended up finding an old car, fixed it up and had it ready for me in a week and dropped it off so that I could go to work. And I started my job, and that's how I began in the mortgage industry. Started making $11 an hour through a temp agency at a mortgage company. And one day I went to tell my boss, thank you for taking a chance on me, because I had no experience in mortgage whatsoever. And I told him we're finally going to be able to move out to our own place. And he said, oh, well, I thought you were living with your sister. And I was like, well, no, I've been living in a shelter. And tears just welled up in his eyes. And he said, Amber, I didn't know that that's what you were facing every day. And you come in here with a smile on your face. I would have never guessed. If it wasn't for people like the director of the shelter and the car repairman and John, my mentor, I wouldn't have been able to climb as high as I am today. I am now a mortgage banker. My kids are 8 years old, and I work for one of the best companies probably in the country. In my opinion, for sure in the country. I think they're actually top 5, but in my opinion, they are number 1. And I still deal with the effects to this day. My kids still deal with the emotional effects of what we have gone through. But it's a day-by-day thing, and we are growing, getting healthy, and succeeding. Thank you for letting me share my story.
We want to thank each and every one of you for participating and contributing to this amazing event. Thank you to our speakers for taking the time to enlighten us and share your stories. We appreciate you so much. Lastly, we want to thank Kawadi and the other businesses that have contributed to this event. We hope to see you at our next Panty Party next year, and we're hoping that with the COVID regulations shifting and changing as we become a healthier society, we'll be able to do a large gathering in person. But until then, thank you for hosting these mini Panty Parties and participating in any way that you can. We appreciate you.